I work on energy projects, including solar plus storage, EV charging stations, planning using telemetrics data. We do sustainability planning, greenhouse gas accounting, kind of the whole works. So I'm really excited to talk to you all today about kind of the renewable energy policy transition within the federal government. However, I do want to make a quick disclaimer that the content in this presentation is mine alone. I'm not reflecting the views of the U.S. government of General Services Administration. So I have to say that just so you know. I'm really excited to talk to you a bit about what's happening currently with the new administration and where we're headed. So let's dive in. So today I just want to talk a little bit about, for some folks on the call that are in the sustainability space or getting into the sustainability space, a quick little layup of my career and how I got to where I was. I'm going to go over a lot of the new executive order policy overviews. I'm going to talk about the impact it's had on General Services Administration, primarily in the commercial real estate sector. And then I'm going to talk a bit about what my thoughts are on how we're moving towards net zero, as well as how policy drives program implementation on a national level. So let's get going. So how it started. So when I went to San Diego State University for my undergrad and got involved in a lot of grassroots organizing around sustainability and environmentalism. I worked a lot on creating a sustainability major, bike lanes, planning an annual Earth Day event, and getting kind of involved with a lot of local businesses, getting them on campus to do a green job fair, and kind of really dove into the sustainability space. From there, I went on to work for a family-owned renewable energy company that had business to business, business to government, and business to consumer sales. And I learned a lot about how does renewable energy work? Why did it make sense, especially for folks based in California with a lot of the federal FTC credits, as well as how to basically work within the state system to really lobby for net energy metering and some of the really nice protections that we have here in California to bolster renewable energy usage. I ended up pivoting from there to do Peace Corps in Peru, which was an amazing experience where I worked on ecotourism and some reforestation projects. And then after that, I ended up going to grad school at the Middlebury Institute of International Studies, which is a small liberal arts school in sleepy Monterey, where I had the opportunity to participate as an EDF Climate Corps fellow. And I worked in New Jersey for a while with the New Jersey Natural Gas Program to oversee local government energy audits for school districts, cities, small businesses. We worked a lot with the Energy Star Portfolio Manager, a lot of those suite of tools that we currently use today at GSA. And I had some other interesting experiences with the local governments administering the Energy Watch program, which oversaw a lot of rebates for lighting, LED swap outs and retrofits. And I did a small stint at a startup after grad school doing sustainability analysis and doing their annual corporate social responsibility report at a lab called Canalysis Labs. And now I'm at General Services Administration, and I'm going to dive into kind of the whole suite of programs and areas that I focus on for work. Whoops, hold on one sec. This is not working. There we go. Cool. So this year has been really an exciting time to work for the government. The scale of impact in which a lot of the executive orders that were passed early on this year have allowed us to really take a step back of what we were currently doing and really put sustainability at the forefront of our business model. So one of the main acts that was implemented back in 2020 was the Energy Act that really started leading us towards having KPIs surrounding energy metrics, reduction goals on an individual building basis. And that really set up a good foundation for some of the new executive orders that were put in place by the Biden-Harris administration. So I'm happy to share this slide deck after the presentation so that you can click and read through some of the executive orders if you're interested, but I'll just kind of do a high level overview of these 3 executive orders and kind of how they impact us. So Executive Order 14008, this first order here, which is tackling the climate crisis at home and abroad, really lays out a solid foundation for looking at various metrics, including environmental justice, social justice issues, looking at greenhouse gas reporting, looking at energy and renewable energy procurement for the government. So what's really interesting is this is kind of a really broad reaching executive order talking about how do we get to a more sustainable energy mix for not only GSA, but all federal agencies as a whole. And so this really allows EPA, GSA, DOE, all the various agencies that we interface with and we lease space to for their buildings and their headquarters in DC and all across the country. We're really working right now on figuring out, how do we do that? How do we get to 100% renewable energy by 2025? We're on track to hit that measure before then, but right now we've been doing a lot of analysis on our current energy mix. So where are we getting energy? So currently we procure, some of our energy from local utilities. We also enter into power purchase agreements for wind and solar. And we're also right now looking at what does solar plus storage look like and how could that impact our, not only the grid, but also resiliency of our buildings. So resiliency to us means if there is an extreme weather event or if for some reason the local utility grid gets shut down, that we have, Wi-Fi and security systems up and running. So resiliency for us means how do we create systems that reduce strain on the local utility grid while also providing resources for our agencies that we lease space to. So moving on, the second executive order listed here, 14005, is all about ensuring that the government can, when economically feasible, procure items that were made in America. So what that means for me and my role is, for example, when I'm getting an RFP, which is a request for proposal or a request for information on a solar system, I'm looking at obviously how much does it cost, what is the return on investment, but are we able to procure solar panels that have pieces, what pieces of the solar panels are either manufactured in the United States or are they all manufactured overseas? We're taking that into consideration in terms of creating a sustainability matrix for our sustainability projects. So this is a really exciting time. I think that we are at the point where we're getting to add in a lot of pieces to our sustainability puzzle based on the projects that we're doing to really be thoughtful and mindful about, again, creating that closed loop system or creating a circular approach when all possible for procurement. Executive Order 3990 is protecting public health and environment and restoring science to tackle the climate crisis. So this means, when we do our sustainability reporting, we're able to utilize climate science data, we're able to cite papers, there's no more redactions, which is a really welcome change, considering all federal agencies now have an appointed climate advisor who is someone that essentially works with all the various business sectors of each agency and puts together goals for the agency that they meet for a year, 5 years, 10 years down the road. So in terms of forward thinking, this climate advisor is a real thought leader across not only their agency, but all of the climate policy advisors that meet from all the various agencies and share ideas and share templates and projects that they're doing so that we can increase, I call it the sustainability lens across the federal government. So something that's really exciting is the final one here is the Green Buildings Job Act of 2021. Now, this is a really interesting proposal. Right now, it hasn't been introduced it has been introduced in the last session, but it's still on the table. It hasn't been approved, but essentially this would provide new training for green jobs, green collar jobs is what we call them. So whether that is manufacturing solar panels or electric vehicles or windows that are more energy efficient. There's a lot of various opportunities in terms of the sustainability job market. I've been in this space for well over a decade, coming up on, a decade and a half, like many of you, I'm sure. And I have never seen as many jobs available today in the sustainability space as I have, which really excites me for the future and for, the folks that are in college or in grad school or even high school. I mean, the jobs that are available today, I couldn't even imagine being there 5 years ago. So there's so much change happening with vertical integrations into banks, into fashion retailers like Gap, Lululemon, financial sectors like BlackRock. They're opening up a lot of ESG, which is environmental social governance roles. So that's thinking about how does sustainability impact us as a financial institution. So needless to say, there's a lot of jobs out there, and I'm happy to help anybody that's in the market. I do a lot of mentorship, so I'm happy to help if anybody needs it. So let's get back to kind of how do these policies really impact projects for GSA? So right now, we're working quite a bit on planning for fleet electrification, not only for GSA, but for a lot of the agencies that we rent space to. So right now, a lot of the work I've been doing is working with various stakeholders at different agencies and essentially helping them take their data on their current fleets and analyzing it and determining what fleet vehicles would be good to potentially swap out for plug-in hybrid electric or all electric vehicles. And so that we can start looking at what does fleet electrification look like for you and how can we make it work the best within your constraints. A lot of what I also do is education and capacity building around electric vehicle charging stations. So I will meet with building managers, I will meet with the sustainability team, and I'll walk them through the various options that we have already pre-procured through a blanket purchase agreement. And many times I help them with site design and telling them, here's what you need to look for when installing an EV charging station, and break it down into building blocks so that it's not overwhelming for folks that this is new to, because we have various levels of charging stations. We have DC fast charging, which charges extremely fast. We have level 2 and level 1 options, and we're trying to phase out level 1 so that as fleet electrification becomes more prominent, they have the infrastructure in place to not only help the agency, but also potentially allow employees to charge and or the public down the road. I talked a bit about Made in America already. Renewables. This is a super exciting piece that the government has really taken head on currently. We are currently working on looking at the portfolio I currently manage, which is in DC, Maryland, and Virginia. And we're doing a lot of essentially load analysis on our electricity usage. So we're pulling down 15-minute interval data. We're running it through some tools that NREL, the National Energy Renewable Laboratory, provides, and essentially determining, what size solar system would work for this building. How much will it cost? How much roof space are we going to need? And then we do mock-ups on the building with AutoCAD and ArcGIS to essentially determine the actual footprint of the solar system. And then we're able to kind of package it and give it to the agencies to show, based on your annual electrical usage, we can offset X% of your energy by installing a solar system to help, one, meet our 100% renewable goal by 2025, but also talk to them about the added benefits of also selling your production, if it's excess, to the local SREC market, which is the solar renewable energy credit market. And that essentially allows us to generate revenue on these systems for many years to come, which can then help provide essentially a green fund that will provide building envelope upgrades. You could do lighting upgrades. You could do water efficiency projects, energy efficiency projects, and it becomes, again, another closed, more closed loop system where we're able to support these sustainability projects through a green fund. Greenhouse gas emissions. This is a big item that we're currently figuring out how to look at greenhouse gas emissions for procurement, for building retrofits, for building upgrades. And this is a really interesting thought space to be in because we're working with various tools that the EPA has to calculate a lot of the savings, but we're trying to look at the future of what does this look like for us down the road and how can we incorporate it into our everyday business practices. And then as always, we've had the Energy Policy Act since 2005 that has really driven sustainable design at GSA. And you can actually Google that and it'll come up with a long PDF to talk a bit more about that. I know we're a bit crunched on time, so I'm not going to dive super deep into that. So moving on. So I'll move towards net zero. That's essentially the long-term goal here for GSA. Through ESA, we're essentially required to build net zero for any new construction and or major remodels by 2030. So I know that seems like a long way away still, with it being only 2021, but we're really having to go back to the drawing board to relook at, we're not doing business as usual. We're trying to figure out ahead of time how the government can pivot and be a bit more dynamic in their decision making to take into account a couple of different options in terms of green building principles and sustainability metrics. So I just wanted to talk about this a little bit in terms of how do we do that? So when you look at a whole building and how you procure energy, I mean, net zero has to do with the landscaping that you put in the building. So doing xeriscaping, which is, water resilient, low water usage, looking at potentially gray water systems, black water systems, looking at, again, renewable or battery storage options so that we can do what's called islanding, which means the building can essentially run specific systems off of the battery for anywhere between 1 to 3 business days. We're looking at all these options right now. I can't get into the real specifics on this, but it's definitely on the forefront and some things that we're currently working on. We have what's called the Guiding Principles Program, which is a really neat program. And I realize this is the old link. We have our new RFI out, where essentially we go out to various, actually the public in general, and we say, these are the 5 technologies we're looking at. So for example, it could be like I have here, solar module design. So whether it's solar on windows, whether it's solar tiles, whether it's solar vertical integration onto the building, those are some of the technologies that have been submitted. We're looking at PV windows where they actually have a window casing with solar cells on them that generate electricity for the building. And then again, we have like solar plus storage. This program is really neat. We get to work with a lot of smaller tech startups typically that are in the building and commercial space. And they gift us their technology. And then we work with one of the national labs to essentially do monitoring and verification on their products. And then we put out white papers and we essentially back the product if it works to then use their technology and scale it across our commercial real estate portfolio. So this is a really neat program that's been around for about 10 years. And I'm actually going to be transitioning over to that team. And so I'm happy to share this RFI for FY22 with anyone that's interested. It's just a really amazing program in terms of we typically do 5 pilots per technology across our portfolio. Then we have 1 year period where we do monitoring and verification. And then it's about a year and a half later that we put out the results. So I can share that link with everyone. So how does policy really drive programs, right? So that's, I think, the big disconnect that I had before I started working for the government. I would always hear about policy, but I didn't understand, where the rubber meets the road, as they say. So, for example, I want to talk a bit more about fleet electrification. I think this is a really hot topic. A lot of you have seen new car companies pop up. A lot of the big auto manufacturers have really come out with big, audacious goals about, for example, Volvo. I think they said they were going to be all electric by 2030. And a lot of the big car makers have been coming out with really big commitments around electrification. Now, what does that mean for the government, right? Well, for example, if you think about how your mail gets to your house and it gets delivered in one of those older trucks that sometimes are loud and a little, screechy on the brakes, we're looking at currently replacing the USPS fleet and moving forward with fleet electrification. So there's so many good aspects of why we should go electric. I mean, you're going to have a lot less pollution. You'll have less noise pollution. We'll be able to really maybe potentially replan routes based on the battery life. There's going to definitely be some challenges on the road ahead, but we're going to see in our lifetime a really big change in terms of, I think personally, quality of life around delivery and package delivery and pollution. So we're going to see a big reduction. And I think right now we're still kind of in this R&D phase of figuring out what makes the most sense based on the telemetrics data, which is essentially data that we have available because we install little devices on the cars to understand how many miles do they drive a week, a month, a year. How long is the engine, the ICE, internal combustion engine runtime? How often does it refill? How much money do we spend on maintenance for brakes and oil? And we're starting to put together a lot of economic models to understand the savings for the various types of approved models that we have for both internal combustion engine as well as electric vehicles and plug-in hybrid electric vehicles. So I just want to make sure we're good on time. So good. 6:30. So I'm just going to talk for a couple more minutes, then we can open up for questions. Okay, Julia? But the other thing I really am excited about is we also work a lot with other federal agencies, Department of Energy. We work with National Renewable Energy Laboratory, and we are working to pilot a lot of new technology. And there are so many fellowships, internships, jobs available. So again, I'm happy to connect you with various job postings, some other job sites that we use if you're looking to get into the sustainability space. There's a lot going on right now at the government. And I know I'm probably talking a million miles a minute, but it's just because I'm really excited and I love what I do. And I always like to end my talks with a small quote. So, never doubt that a group of small, never doubt that a group of small, thoughtful, committed citizens can change the world. It's the only thing that ever has. This is one of my favorite quotes from Margaret Mead, and I think it's so true. It can be discouraging, it can be difficult to effectuate change, but I think that we're at this precipice where there are so many changes in motion that this is really the time for sustainability. It's really a time to make a difference. So if there's something you're interested in or something you want to learn about, I would just encourage you to keep being curious, keep learning. That's what I've been able to do throughout my career. And I just feel so grateful and happy to be able to do what I do. So I just wanted to say thank you and take some time for questions.
Awesome. Thank you, Erin. Lots of amazing information packed into that little bit of time. Thank you so much. That was very insightful. I'll just start with a couple little comments that we have in the chat box. I know Drew said that he attended summer language program at Middlebury in 1976. So some cool alignment there. And then I don't know if you are able to see the chat box, Erin, but Jackie had a comment in there and maybe you can speak to some of her points if you're able to see it.
Yes, I'm just reading it now. I just exited out of the present mode. So just let me skim through this really quick. Yes, okay. Jackie, very insightful and thoughtful question. So I'm also a big advocate of creating cities around people-centered design, not car-centric design. maybe one or two of the maybe silver linings of COVID, I think. I live in, right now I'm based in San Francisco, and I've seen that there have been a lot of street closures for slow streets programs. So, which I'm super excited about personally, because I love to bike. Like, I have a road bike, I have a beach cruiser. I agree. I think many problems within our communities stem from the fact that we have car-centric cities. I think folks that don't have individual transportation face food deserts, face issues on getting healthy food because they have to wait at a bus stop to get to a grocery store that actually has fresh produce. I've worked in some redlining NGOs. I've done a lot of work around this. I think that you bring up a good point, right? Like, EVs, at the end of the day, they're still an individual mode of transportation for folks. I think, however, you bring up a lot of really good points about resource extraction using finite resources such as lithium ion batteries, right? Where do these batteries come from? A lot of times it comes from third world countries and people that are mining, and they don't necessarily have good rights, or they don't have healthcare, and they're mining these precious metals. And yes, it's not the silver bullet solution. However, what I do believe in is the electric grid system, which I don't want to go too much in the weeds. I'm going to do a really high level my answer for you. So the current electric grid system in the United States is one of the, how do I say this? Is such an aging infrastructure, and it's not prepared for how much electricity we are going to start moving based on the projections of electric vehicle uptake. First and foremost, number one, electric vehicles, we still charge, many utilities still have coal-powered fire plants, which are not necessarily a better alternative to gasoline. I think we have a lot of various pieces of the puzzle we need to put together of getting more renewable resources on the grid to charge with clean power. We're doing some really interesting charging models here in California with the California Public Utilities Commission, where if you set your car to charge from, say, 12 a.m. to, say, 5 a.m., that's when we're able to, that's kind of like the cleanest energy on the grid at that time. So I think that in terms of your point, to me, what I see a lot of your question, what is the underlying thing here, is that to me, I'm seeing EVs as we can reduce air quality issues in areas. We can have cleaner, basically cleaner modes of transportation, but we're not replacing the fact that we're still going to have individual use vehicles on the roads, right? We're still going to have buses. We're still going to be having cities that are not necessarily designed for people. I think that, for me, it's like a part of the solution. It's not the whole solution. And I think, a lot of people aren't really talking about some of the issues you bring up. We're just kind of like excited about electric vehicles and what they can do. But ultimately, like, a big thing I really am concerned about on a personal level is, what are we going to do with all these batteries when they come to end of life? Like, there's some really neat startups that are taking batteries and trying to repurpose them into like secondary, how would I say this? Like a secondary business idea. So they're taking lithium ion batteries and creating a secondary product, right? Because I think, for me, I struggle with this kind of catch-22 where we have this cleaner resource for internal combustion engines, but there's not a real clear path in the private sector or federally to address the waste issues. And I think it's going to take this next generation to really do that. The other quick thing I want to take a minute, if I can, Julia, is to do a quick plug.
Totally.
For a solar grant program that is available that I wanted to share with everybody here. So let me share my screen again. One second. So I also wanted to do a quick plug on, can you guys see my screen, this solar moonshot program?
Yep, I can.
This? Okay, lovely. So there's a really neat fund available that's based out of California. It's basically, the goal is to deploy as much renewable energy as possible across the United States. And they have a couple of very wealthy donors that have created a Vanguard 501c3 fund. And essentially, they're giving nonprofits $25,000 to develop whether solar is right for you, solar plus storage, or solar plus battery storage. And I will share this link. It's a really simple process. I've helped 3 nonprofits receive this a $25,000 grant and install renewable energy to help reduce their annual operating budgets, which has been really nice. And they're still looking for nonprofits. If you or anyone you know, you think they would be a good fit or a nonprofit, feel free to go to this website that I'm going to share. It's a super simple process. You essentially fill out like a 10-question Google form that you put in your 501c3 information. You talk about how this would help you. And then they set up a call with you in the organization to talk about how, what would fit. And a lot of times what you do is you would go you would basically fill out the form, get a quote from local solar providers. So you have 2 or 3 options. And then basically, once you choose the contractor or the business you would like to work with, you work with the fund and they disperse the funds directly to your organization. And then you pay out the contract based on that. I did want to share it because I just think this is such an amazing opportunity. It's really low hanging fruit because it's not a really tedious grant process. With the couple organizations I helped, the full process took about 3 months. So it was a pretty quick turnaround. And we were able to install 2 5 kW solar systems on small buildings in Orange County, California. So it was really nice. But anyways, I'm going to share this link right now. And I will also give Julia I'll send her an email of information as well so that everybody can have this.
Erin, let me ask you a quick question, and this is personal for the LSC, and I don't know how involved you are in that program, but LSC, along with Metro and a couple other community partners, is launching a Solarize campaign to help LMI communities get solar installed. Do you think that could still be an opportunity for us, since we are not directly getting solar for ourselves, but instead helping install in the community?
So like, are you working with nonprofit and community organizations to help them get solar? Is that kind of what I understand?
So it's through Metro, the Rocky Mountain Institute, if you're familiar.
Yeah.
Metro's working with them on a campaign. We're one of the community partners, but we have a couple other involved. And Wallace is on the call. Wallace, you can speak more to this. But the goal is to get solar in LMI communities. It is open to other organizations and nonprofits and businesses, but we are not directly installing. LSE is we don't have like an actual space. So yeah, Wallace, if you want to hop in.
Yeah, this is the most simply understood as setting up an administrative structure for a group buy program and using the resources of the city and LSC to publicize it. But it would be homeowners buying solar themselves. However, I'm involved with a couple of other groups that if the idea of these grants is that the nonprofit installs solar themselves, I think that sounds like a wonderful idea, and I think we may have some ideas to suggest. I've copied down the link for the Hammond Foundation, which I quite agree with you, Erin. It's a wonderful program.
Yeah, so definitely, I'd be happy if you guys shared it. I could set up email with you and the fund manager, Tara Hammond, who it's her organization. She oversees a number of different climate related funds. And then she basically disperses the money through her organization. The only caveat is we can't do single family residences, unfortunately. It has to be a 501c3, but as long as that's happening, they can apply. Mm-hmm.
Awesome. What a cool opportunity. I would love to connect more on that via email with our Solarize team.
Oh, definitely. Yeah, I think Tara's an awesome resource. I actually, we worked together in college, and then we both worked together at Sullivan Solar Power early on in our career, 7, 8 years ago. So she's a really dear friend. So I'm sure she'd be happy to help.
Awesome. That would be great.
Yeah.
And kind of going back in the chat a little bit, we had a comment from Sumedha. I've heard that used EV batteries can be reused in buildings for energy storage. I think the technology is still being explored. The DOE has some preliminary information on this.
Yeah. So, I mean, it's kind of like we're still at this early adopter phase, especially with like the second life of the batteries. DOE has a lot of really, really amazing programs for startups, for loan programs, for folks that are looking to start businesses. There are so many resources. I can put some links together for you, Julia, to basically share some of that. And yes, they're like, unfortunately, I am not able to use the used batteries in some of the projects we're doing, but that's definitely something that's out there. And again, to whose point was it earlier? Jackie, to her point, like these are the ideas that will really change. Me personally, I think will change the impact of EVs. You know, we're still so early days where the early adopters still have, you know, their first cars, or maybe they're now going to upgrade and do a longer battery life, right? So there's so many things out there. It is a really an exciting time. And I know that, you know, to me, it's like the better of two options, right? Like internal combustion engine versus EV. I'll take EV if and when I can afford it, right? I think that's also a big piece, that there's still a pretty big price barrier in terms of accessibility. Also, when you talk about EVs, a big thing that I've done studies on before is, so when you live in multifamily residences, it's really uncommon to have an electric vehicle charging station available to you if you don't own your home. So there's also like equity and equality issues that we're facing within this space that are starting to come to the forefront more, but it's still a challenge that presents itself, and something that we don't necessarily like. It's not necessarily like equal playing field yet. So. I see someone else. Oh, sorry, Nicholas, good point.
Any other questions for Erin? Erin, I have a question for you. So does GSA pilot any new climate technology? Do they have an accelerator program to go along with that?
Yeah, so good question. So we do have an accelerator, which is really exciting because we just put out our request for information for specifically around greenhouse gas emissions calculations, greenhouse gas emissions reductions, carbon sequestration products within the built environment, which is the building space. And I will share that with Julia. It's really neat. So basically we have our request for information open now through mid-December, and we're essentially asking folks that have either startup ideas, or they have a product that they have piloted at 1 or 2 places. They can submit it. And essentially you go through the process of they would gift us the technology. We run a 1-year pilot in a building that is a good fit. And then we do monitoring and verification with one of the national labs, whether it's DOE or NREL or PNNL. And then we're able to kind of give you the silver stamp of approval, and then also scale it across our commercial real estate portfolio, which is quite large. We have buildings in the continental US as well as all of the territories. So, yeah.
And you spoke a little bit about commercial real estate owners. What are some steps that they can do, even if it's a smaller action, to make them a little bit more environmentally friendly?
Yeah, good. So good question. So a lot of times it depends. Right now, there's some low-hanging fruit that you can do, whether it's, for example, you could do a lighting audit. So a lot of times the local utilities will have programs where they'll give you rebates for up to 30% of the cost of an LED bulb to swap out. I'd have to do some research about locally what's available. I'm sure some folks on the call have more information than me. There's also some really neat incentives for water as well. So you can look at like low flow toilets, you can look at various options with landscaping, you know, looking at, again, like drip water, xeriscaping. You can do, again, like low hanging fruit that isn't super expensive. And then there are some programs in certain states. I'm more familiar with the Northeast and then the West Coast, but I found that it's pretty prevalent to do like local government energy audits, where they will come out doing a full energy audit of your building. So I'm talking windows, lighting, HVAC systems, and they basically, what you would do is go through all of the various systems in your building, and you can go online on either Desire or Energy Star website, and you can put in the age of your, whether it's like, for example, let's say HVAC, and you can put it in, and they'll give you a couple options that are Energy Star friendly. And then they'll also connect you with rebates available. So if you have some more big ticket items, it makes it helpful to understand kind of what are your options and what makes the most financial sense for you. And again, I have a ton of links. So I think what I'll just do is like put some bullets of the questions and links of like interesting articles or resources. I think that might be helpful for you and the group, if you guys would be interested.
That would be awesome. If you want to send that to me, I can get that on our website and I can put it on our platforms. I think a lot of people would be really into that.
Yeah, I can do that. No problem.
And I know you were talking about some rebate opportunities for local businesses. And here in Louisville, I think a couple of people on the call are familiar. Lawn Care for Greener Air was doing rebates for green lawn care, and they just opened up a grant program as well to help you figure out that green lawn care for your business. So that's a great option for anybody that has not looked into that. Do we have any other questions for Erin? Yes, Nicole.
I'm just really curious, Erin, to know more about your role within governmental organizations that you support, because first of all, I'm encouraged to know that your position exists. Never heard of General Services Administration and had no idea that there was a whole division of people like you helping to improve the government systems and make our government greener. So that's exciting to know that you exist, but I'm curious to know how many Erins are out there in the world. You talked about having this kind of like mid-Atlantic scope, but you live in California, and give us like 30 seconds on, are there more of you out there? Because that makes me happy.
No, for sure. Yeah, it's fine. Okay. So like, since this is like my personal view, I'm not representing the government right now. You know, I like to joke that we came out of the sustainability closet after the last election, because it was a very different space with the previous administration. I mean, we were still doing our work. However, it has just been a huge shift. So essentially, to give you kind of a breakdown of how GSA is structured and then who we interface with, I can kind of go through that quickly. So GSA has 11 different regions broken up across the state. So we have like the Mid-Atlantic, we have West Coast, East Coast, and we break up the states into various regions. Within each region, we have a climate and sustainability team. So those people will be energy subject matter experts, greenhouse gas emissions experts. We have teams of engineers that sit on these teams to do kind of project analysis and make sure the calculations, and we do a lot of complex like HVAC and variable frequency drive projects that reduce the amount of runtime our buildings are pushing air throughout buildings. And there's a lot of really technical specs that we work with for integrating a lot of the piloted green proving ground projects that we do. So within those 11 regions, we have 11 teams, anywhere between 3 to 15 people that work on the work that I do. Now that's just on the actual public building service side. So there's 3 pillars of business lines at GSA. We have Office of Government, which is policy and thought leadership. We have PBS, Public Building Service, which is where I sit with those 11 other teams. And then we have FAS, which is Federal Acquisition Service, who interfaces with all of the other federal agencies to purchase their fleet vehicles. So on the FAS side of the house, we have about 20 people working on fleet electrification, getting more electric vehicles, plug-in hybrid electric vehicles on our procurement list, which means they can just look at a car and say, we want that one, and we put the order in, and we get a bit of a reduced rate because of economies of scale. At the office, the government office of policy, we have about a team of 20 people, but then when you look at all of the other federal agencies, so think like DOE, HUD, FAA, I mean, so, you know, there's like so many, think of all the federal agencies. Each one of those agencies in the past year has had a climate and sustainability policy advisor appointed, and they're currently building out their teams. So if sustainability was not a priority in the past, which could or could not have been, right? Like EPA has a sustainability team that I interface with probably once every 2 weeks, and we have meetings and we share best practices, and we help connect the dots with funding from DOE to do projects at the headquarters in DC. I mean, we interface with a lot of different sustainability teams, but it's a huge growing field. So our agency alone, GSA, General Services Administration, I call it Uncle Sam's landlord. We're going to be doing a slew of hiring for sustainability experts and at various levels. So, you know, early career, mid-career, and late career. So you're going to see a lot of hiring going on probably in the next year or so around these, kind of everything I just talked about. And so we're really vamping up for how do we integrate this into business lines that exist, and how do we get the right people at the table?
That's exciting. Thank you.
Yeah.
Ooh, that's so exciting. I also had no idea, but I love to hear it.
Do you know who the person is who might be responsible for, like, within their portfolio would be Kentucky in our region, or what region we even are?
Yeah, so Kentucky, I want to say region 5. I just want to double check before I tell you.
We're region 4.
You are, oh, here we go. I think you're 5. Wait, hold on, let me double check. Oh no, you're 4. You're region 4. What I'll do is I'll reach out to them and see if we could set up a call, because it would be interesting, because like all the federal courthouses are GSA. So if there's one like in town, maybe they could talk about some of the sustainability projects they've done to kind of like tie it all together. I could see if they'd be interested in potentially, I know that Julia's like super booked up until next year, but that could actually work out well, because there will likely be a lot of changes until then.
That would be awesome. And even doing some type of workshop around that would be really, really cool.
Okay. Yeah. So let me reach out, and then I can follow up with you guys and see if they'd be interested. Yeah. I mean, now it's just, I have so much optimism that it's just kind of contagious, and there's just a lot of really neat projects happening. And it's hard because I think we're starting to get better at communicating and sharing white papers and sharing resources, but you know, we don't always make like the splashy front page like Google or Facebook or some of the other big tech companies, but there's a lot of really neat projects happening. So yeah.
Well, I know you've had your hand raised if you want to step in.
Yeah, if I could, Erin, I just curious to tap into your knowledge of electrical vehicles and their related costs. Like, I'm curious to know if EVs typically do not replace the brake pads as often as gasoline powered. And I've read that the fossil fuel vehicle is usually about 4 cents a mile for their fuel, and I think electrics are a lot less. I'm just curious what you can tell us about the numbers and nuts and bolts on that.
Yeah, definitely. So that's a really good question. I think I read somewhere on average, I want to say typically electric vehicles save, I want to say between $800 to $1,000 per year on like brakes, oil changes, of those sorts of things of that nature. The electricity factor is super interesting because So like, for example, in California, we have some of the most expensive residential rates for energy. When you get into tier 4, we're paying well over 50 cents a kilowatt hour. So for us, it is still cheaper than a gallon of gas, because right now a gallon of gas is $4.67 the last time I passed a station.
Oh.
So it's really expensive. However, I think price parity in terms of like comparing apples to apples for gas, I want to say the gasoline, I think the last time I did the calculation, it was something like on average 15 cents a kWh if you're charging overnight, because that's kind of like the lowest tier pricing. And so on average, you know, depending, again, there's a lot of factors depending where you live, but it was something like, instead of paying, for example, $50 to fill up, you're paying like 25 for charging, which is still, you know, it's still money, right? It's just going to a different provider. Instead of Shell or Chevron, you're paying PG&E or SDG&E, right? But what's really neat is we're seeing a lot of folks who have electric vehicles in California that are single family residents, homeowners. They've oversized their solar systems, because solar is so ubiquitous here, that they've oversized their solar system to plan for purchasing an electric vehicle. So they plan to produce enough energy that that $25 bill to charge up will go away, because they'll be able to feed directly from their solar system. So there's a lot going on around this here right now. But I did, one of my coworkers sent me an article recently on it, and I think it went more into the economics of it. Because again, I'm working on a federal level where we're talking like, you know, thousands of cars that I'm doing models on. And then we also have really reasonable pricing for electricity in the DC, Maryland, Virginia region where I work. So the economics might be a little different than like personally where I live.
I assume that electric vehicles win on life cycle costing fairly handily already over gasoline powered vehicles.
Wait, so say that again. Sorry, I had a truck go by my apartment.
Use life cycle costing. I assume that the approximately $8,000 an electric vehicle saves a lifetime means that they cost less on a life cycle basis than gasoline vehicles already.
Yeah, I mean, so I have a used Prius plug-in electric hybrid. So I have a battery, right, that has about 20 miles of range essentially. So it gets me 2 to 3 days of driving if I'm just going to the grocery store or whatever. But since my battery is so small, you know, like I put 40,000 miles on it in 4 years, and I have not changed the brakes once. I still have to change the oil every 5,000 miles on my car, and I have synthetic oil, which is a little more pricey, but I don't drive that much. Like I changed my oil maybe twice a year. And again, I've had a lot less maintenance than my previous internal combustion car from a personal standpoint. But yes, to your point of, you know, the lifetime savings, if you look at that compared to the gasoline prices, the maintenance, and depreciation, because my car has held its value quite well if I were to resell it, especially in this market with the chip shortage that we're in right now. I mean, used cars are going for almost as much as brand new cars off the lot. So I think in terms of depreciation and resale value, I think it's going to be really interesting to see what happens with that. But yes, I think you're right. So.
Okay, everyone. Well, I'm seeing it's 7 o'clock on the dot. Thank you everyone for being here. Erin, your optimism and energy is very refreshing. So thank you so much for that energy you brought tonight. And this was really, really interesting. I look forward to connecting with you further, and we'll be sure to share all those points she sends over to us on all of the LSC platforms and on our